may be as surprised as I am that I'm going to begin this talk with the idea of some good news from the United States. Which really, frankly, is bizarre for me to even say, since we have just accelerated the pace towards fascism as a serious, real existing project, adding to the many other authoritarian, seriously right-wing conservative governments dominating the world at this moment. So, as we often say in our movement, we don't lose anything by being sober. We gain by being serious and grounded, pursuing that ever popular path of pessimism of the mind and optimism of the will, which is needed now more than ever. The good news that I am I feel grounded and sober in this assessment is to say that somehow, miraculously, the elements of the labor movement that William Z. Foster wanted, that our comrades on this panel clearly want and work for every day, that I'm going to assume that most of you, those of you who are in a position to do so, are also building. The elements of that labor movement that were present here are showing up now in the US labor movement, shocking the living daylights out of all of us. Those elements are listed by Foster in the introduction here. So he says, this labor movement, the organizing of the steel industry, it must be based in the work site. It has got to be completely shaped by the interests, the aspirations, the consciousness, the political directions of the workers themselves. So right there, you have bottom-up unionism, which is the byword for labor notes and for those of us on the left side of the labor movement. He talks about the need for militancy. Well, it goes without saying. A movement that has the interests of workers shaping it must be militant. There can be no idea of compromise with employers, with the capitalist class or its allies in government. There can be no resort to parliamentarianism or to begging favors from elected officials. Those are completely inconsistent, as we have seen over and over and over again. He talks about the absolute necessity for unity. He talks about the democratic process being really grounded in the work site, but making sure that it is networked, connected to, and coordinated with every other element of worksite organization, both in that industry and across industries. I mean, these are just very basic foundational building blocks for any movement that is eventually going to be capable of challenging capitalism. It is also the building blocks for any movement that is going to be capable of rehumanizing us. Since the task of capitalism, which has been particularly refined by its latest guise in the form of neoliberalism, has a great deal to do with dehumanizing us in every possible way. Separating ourselves, obviously, from our own labor, alienating our relationship to any sense of the creative process, using our mind, using our judgment, using our professional or craft expertise. So we have to be alienated from that. We must be in constant competition with everybody around us, all against all the time, young against old, genders against one another, obviously divided by race, divided by language and ethnicity, by job title. When we talk about industrial unionism, we add to that the different unions also be in competition with one another. So those things dehumanize us because you feel constantly fragile and under attack at the same time, aggressively positioned towards everybody else that is around you, with no safety, with no sense that there is a home base. For as long as I can remember, all I ever wanted to do in my life was to be a union organizer, and the way I always thought of it was our unions should be beloved communities. They should be. But they almost never are. They're almost always collusive with the boss. Most of our unions in the US, they are almost always top down. They are almost always very bureaucratic. They are almost always, even when they fight and win wage increases, win benefits and insurance, they almost always do not touch your life in the workplace. It is so rare for workers, even after a strike that has won something, to feel differently in the workplace. Those of you who are organizers or workers who've been through strikes, you know that. So there is also a process of humanization, which Foster doesn't talk that much about it, but it's all right. He talks about a lot of other important things. We turn to people like Paulo Freire and Ella Baker and Miles Horton and others for that. Unfortunately, we can bring them together. So the good news is that after my entire life being a period of decline of the US labor movement, the high point, 35% in the private sector density, was the year I was born. It's a little embarrassing. And it's been downhill since then. And it is still not really growing. I mean, we have single digit, I don't know what exactly, 8 or 9% in the private sector. About 35% in public sector. It's just helpful, but so just one of your comments, the questions that we are asking ourselves, even in the US, with so much resurgence of labor activity and new organizing going on, we still can't get the density up. And there are many reasons for that. But what I would really say about that, I don't pay that much attention to it. I mean, of course, we need unions. We need to increase our density. We should be organizing all the time. But really, what I pay attention to is consciousness. Are working people thinking about the fact that they're being exploited? And if so, are they doing something about it? And I'm finding, and I hope some of you are finding, that is more and more and more what is on people's minds. So after these decades of decline, and frankly, Labor Notes, which pulls down this pole of the labor movement, the rank and file, militant, bottom up pole of the labor movement, it's been a little lonely for us for these last decades. But after 2008, the financial crisis, we began to see that there was something stirring that we had not expected. And what is stirring is that particularly among people under the age of probably about 30, maybe 35, the younger you get, the more it's stirring, is this sense of, this is completely intolerable. The Occupy movement, 2010, after the financial crisis, was like, I think of it as kind of a cry of despair. It was just, what? You're leaving what kind of world to us? Are you kidding? I'm going to have $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 of debt just for going to college. You've told me the only way I can get a job is by going to college. And yet, I go to college, I carry this debt for the rest of my life, enriching the banks, as you know. It's impossible to ever pay it off. And the wages that are being offered me and the jobs that are being offered me not only will never pay off that debt, I can't pay rent, I can't get a mortgage, I can't have a family, I can't own a car, I can't take any days off from work like that. Plus the jobs are utterly meaningless. They are filled with emptiness. I worked most of my professional life as an organizer in the teachers' union, and I can tell you, and I'm glad to see my teacher comrades here, teachers will tell you that it is unbearable to have to carry with one part of their mind some idea, is there another teacher back there, of ethical, professional, moral judgment about what you should be doing with young people, which is helping them to develop a sense of themselves. What is the world about? What is the relationship to the world? How can you possibly manage what you have at birth, what came to you in this increasingly brutal, bestial environment? But instead of that, what you are forced to do is spend most of your time with metrics and with absolutely meaningless teaching and testing and just soul-destroying work. But I hear this from everyone all the time. I hear it from journalists, I hear it from nurses, I hear it from baristas, I hear it from people in the entertainment industry. everywhere you go, people will say meaning has been not only drained, it's been wrenched out of our lives. So you have this problem of deep dehumanization, alienation, material conditions I can't possibly afford to live. What? What do I do? So we know what the choices are. Socialism or barbarism. For the moment, it seems a disproportionate number of people, when asked to pull the ballot lever, are voting for barbarism because, as we know, right-wing demagogues will tend to fill that vacuum with something. That's my understanding of how we got Trump again. We'll fill it with something. Here's the thing that is interesting, though. We're seeing millions of people that voted for that fascist fool are very available in their workplace to someone coming up to them and saying, how's it going? What's happening? How are you doing? What are the problems here? Do you have a union? Does the union do anything? Do you want to try and jumpstart it, change it, transform your union? Or you don't have a union? Would you be interested in talking to some other people? And the answers are yes, 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 from everyone. This is unbelievable for us. So across industries, across regions of the country, North, South, conservative, across races, immigrant workers, Latino, African American, doesn't matter. In every industry, the impulse towards organizing as a response to this just decay that runs through society is real. People that know me well know I'm rather enthusiastic, and I sometimes engage in hyperbole about things I believe in. But I'll give you a few examples. I'll give you the one that's closest to my heart. So Labor Notes, this project has been around for about 50 years. It's had many lean years. We now give conferences every 2 years. Some of you, I believe, have been to it. In 2024 and 2022, we had to cut off registration of 5,000 people, conference in Chicago, and turn away many thousands of people. So it's a barometer, right? People not only are interested in labor organizing, whatever, but they also know maybe not those big unions, those big bureaucratic hollow unions where nothing is ever said and people yell at you from the front of the room, or you want to go to a place where you actually meet people from every sector who are doing what you're doing, and you get to hear and learn about what people are doing. It is the most vibrant, it's a kind of frighteningly vibrant environment, actually. For those of us who've been here, can be a little overwhelming. But anyway, that is just one sort of measure. The measure that I look at is really this. People are organizing. No doubt heard about the Amazon warehouse organizing. That continues, that grows. I right now just informally supervise numbers of SALTs, people that go into a workplace with the intention of organizing. These are mostly people in their 20s. Amazon is, a fiercely anti-union employer, and they're beginning to win. They're forming organizing committees. They're persisting against all kinds of legal challenges. They're winning some of those legal challenges. Starbucks, you're aware of, knows, we'll see if they ever end up with the contract, but they now have about 500 stores where our union has been recognized. Something will happen. The Starbucks management has promised that they will engage in some kind of national framework agreement. But let's look at other things. The reform of unions in the direction of democracy, the United Auto Workers. Some of you may know there was a little turn around at the top of the United Auto Workers, which had been a corrupt, hollow sellout union for many decades. A caucus was formed called United Auto Workers for Democracy. They got the Justice Department on the case. Now their entire national leadership is in jail. And then they elected this reform platform, this reformed slate. I'm sorry. Sean Fain, who is, think of him as the Bernie Sanders of the labor movement, like authentically actually committed to class power, to internationalism. He's quite an amazing guy. Anyway, brought out the United Auto Workers for the first time ever in a coordinated strike against the big three automakers. That had never happened before. Made big gains. Teamsters Union, also with the inside work of a caucus called Teamsters for Democratic Union, which has been around as long as Labor Notes, throughout the mafia over many years, and elected also a reasonably progressive slate, having a fabulous national UPS campaign last year that should have ended up in a strike. They stopped just short, but won a good contract. So some of the big industrial unions are reforming. I think I will probably end with this. Maybe I'll make one more point after this, but what I led with in terms of, talking about what is happening materially at the level of workplaces, is the fastest growing sector. That is to say, with the largest number of successful union elections are graduate students. And the highest percentage of strikes in the labor movement are among graduate students. Nobody would have predicted this. And graduate students, I believe, and I suspect this is happening here and in many other countries as well, higher education is one of the places that had to be monetized. If to run an education system as a public good is intolerable to the market could not stand that, and it has not stood it. And so the privatization of education at the K-12 level, which I know is proceeding here with the academization, at the higher education level, they have had some different techniques, but the grad students feel it. They feel that they are the cash cows of these universities, heavily exploited, underpaid. They cannot live on what they're making. And they got some politics, and they are feeling this political impulse. And so they are taking these long, open-ended strikes, days, weeks, months. The longest graduate student strike just finished recently. Boston University graduate students, a 7-month strike. They're winning major gains, and most importantly, they are showing that it is possible to have democratic bottom-up unionism, take on the boss, take on the large social issues, and learn to fight again on the principles that William Z. Foster gave us some years ago. Thank you.